Hi, everyone, and welcome to another informative session in the AJE live webinar series. We are thrilled to connect with you each and every month and bring you insights from a diverse group of subject matter experts that we are able to connect with. My name is Sabrina Krebs. I'm the marketing manager here at AJE, and I will be your moderator for today's event. To ensure a smooth session, let's cover a couple of quick details. So we have muted all attendees to ensure clear audio for our speaker. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions by typing them into the questions pane, and we will review those together during the Q&A portion after the presentation. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available in our on-demand library later this afternoon. Lastly, everyone will be receiving a certificate of attendance for your participation today. I'd like to welcome all of those who are new to AJE. We are sort of your one-stop shop for everything related to getting your research published. From editing to translation, formatting, and promotion, AJE has been supporting researchers since 2004, and we are actually celebrating our 20th year anniversary. Joining me today, I have Dr. Shalini Garg, who is the founding editor-in-chief of the Lancet Regional Health for Southeast Asia, to share her insights on structuring your manuscript from an editor's perspective. And we are going to pass the microphone over to you, Shalini. You can give formal introductions much better than I can. Thank you for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you so much for your kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me today to interact with the researchers in our audience today. So yes, as Sabrina mentioned, I'm Shalini Garg, and I'm the founding editor of a new initiative of the Lancet called the Lancet Regional Health, and I lead the journal for the Southeast Asia region. And this journal was launched 2 years ago, and we have been receiving a lot of support from the regional researchers and authors, and we hope that we are able to achieve what we have set out to bring voices to the researchers of the 11 countries of this region. So thank you so much for joining us today in this webinar that is titled Structuring Your Manuscript, and I'll be handing out tips from an editor's perspective. And so I have got 25 minutes, so I'll use this time to the best. But what I would ask you to do is to think about the time when you started writing a paper in, lately, and what were all the questions that popped up in your mind while you were thinking about writing that paper, while you were thinking about starting to embark on this journey of writing that paper. Some of the questions that you were asking yourself, some of the challenges that you faced before submission and during submission, and how did you encounter them? So keep those questions in mind, keep those things in mind, and check if my presentation answers those questions. If not, we will try to answer them in the question and answer session later. So, so today my presentation is going to center around 3 key points and 5 strategies on how to structure your manuscript, because as an editor, when I receive your manuscript, there are a few things that I look for. Next slide, please, Sabrina. Thank you. So when we say that we are writing a paper, we are also saying that we are telling a story. And what are the qualities that we are looking for in the story? So 3 C's: complete, concise, and clear. And how you make that story complete, concise, and clear is what we are going to talk about in this presentation. So there are 5 things that you have to look out for, 5 things that you have to keep in mind, and those are listed on this slide. Ask an interesting question. Which journal do you submit your research to? Writing a good introduction or a covering letter to your submission, telling the full story, and showing an advance on the previous work. Sabrina, can we switch the slides? Thanks. Next slide. So the first thing that we do in our research paper or research study is asking a research question. Now, when you present that research question in a paper, of course, you have already done your study and you know what your research question is, but how is that going to look in your research paper? So there are a few things that you want to keep in mind when you're presenting that question in your paper. So is that paper? So these are things that you should point out or highlight in the paper. Is that whether it's going to change any practice? Is it going to bring a change in the policy? And is it just exploratory? It's going to inform future research. It's very, very preliminary at this time, but it could lead to major results in the future. So these are important things that you should highlight in your when you are mentioning your research question. Does it answer a first or a last in a topic, including negative findings? So is it the first question in the field, or is it the last one? Does it answer everything now? Is it a piece? Is it the last piece in the puzzle? So like, for example, about aspirins or statins, how did the story go? So for a long period of time, aspirin or statins were the last answer. But now, again, there are findings that have disrupted the scenario, and there's new research going on, including negative findings. You have to look for the audience that you are appealing to in that study. What is it? Who is the audience for the study? So make your study interesting to a wider audience. Was your research question answered ethically? Is your study has been done ethically sound? What were the methods used for your study? Were they robust enough to answer that research question? These are the things that readers will see. And have you reported your story fully? So these are the things that you have to look out for when setting the research question in the introduction part of your study. Next slide, Sabrina. Thank you. Next slide. The second question that might have popped it in your mind is, when you sit down to write a paper, is which journal should I submit to? So before even embarking upon the journey of writing a paper, there are a few things that you should consider. Please try to pick a few journals before you start writing a paper, or maybe you have prepared a first draft. So look out for your audience. What is the target audience? Is it a specialist audience you're looking for, cardiologists, public health specialists, health policy people, or is it a general audience that you're looking for? You're looking for readers only in India, or you're looking for global readers? Who is the readership? So that determines the journal that you're going to submit to. So for our journal example, our journal has a global readership, but the research pertains only to the region. So you have to look out for these things before you start formatting your paper. What is the standard of journal? What kind of research it has published in the past in that certain topic? So look out for those papers and look at the standard. What is the speed of publication? Those things are now mentioned on the homepage of the journal. So you could look out of that if you have certain targets in mind. Another thing of interest could be the word length, or number of citations that are allowed, or categories that are allowed in that journal. So you should check the journals before starting writing the paper, because that will determine the formatting. Do you have funds to pay the publication charges? Would you choose an open access journal or a subscription journal? Another word of caution on predatory journals. So predatory journals are very common in our field, and so I would recommend that you should be cautious of the predatory journals. They are very convenient to submit to, and they'll seem very easy because their APCs are low, not very high, and they do not have any peer review process. So I would recommend you check their home pages and check their editorial boards, look for the papers, quality of papers that you've published, and make an informed decision before you submit your paper to any of the journals. Next slide, Sabrina. Thanks. So a small tip to to make it easier for you is go to the reference list of your paper, of your manuscript, and check any of the comparable studies that are very comparable to your own work, and see which are the journals that are popping up. Try submitting to those journals, because that might be the scope of your study might fit in the scope of those journals. So that might be that. It's a good tip to follow when submitting, when finding a most suitable journal for your study. Next slide, Sabrina. Thanks. So for example, now there's another strategy, is that now most of the journals operate like a family. And if you submit your study to one of the journals and the journal editors find that this is not in the scope of study, or it's not their readership, the topic is not a quite niche topic, so they will send this paper to a journal more suitable for that paper. For example, and if not in the Lancet family, they could also transfer it to another journal in the Elsevier family. So it works very well now for the authors. Next slide, Sabrina. So for example, our journal was launched in 2022. So it's a journal that caters to the research that is done in the WHO Southeast Asia region, 11 countries. Now, if you have submitted a study on diabetes to the Lancet, and the Lancet thinks that it's not a priority for them, they might send it to the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, and they might think that this is a paper suitable for a limited readership and not for everybody. It's not a novel concept. They might send it to us, because this study might be proving something in the local context, in the local populations where data might not be available, and it would be very informative for the local practitioners. So it's a good study for the local readership as well. So this is how it works. Next slide, Sabrina. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to read information for authors. I know experienced researchers, after submitting a lot of to a lot of journals, ignore the information for authors, and I see it day in and day out that I have to write emails, to researchers, authors, to check for that information in the guidelines, although they are very seasoned authors. So before submitting the paper, before starting to write down the main paper, do go to the author guidelines, check those guidelines. It's also important because the formatting, the way you format it, it gives you information, a lot of information on what is the scope of the journal, what are the topics they are publishing, what are the categories, word count allowed, references, how it should be formatted. Also, it will tell you how the paper should be structured. Because, I've taken this quote from the ebook that the EASE has published. The information is interpreted more easily if it is placed where readers expect to find it. So for example, for a Lancet reader, they would expect, to see the role of funding source at the end of the methods. Now, if you have placed at the end of the manuscript, they'll fail to find it and keep searching. So it's important that you put the information where it's expected, and it's the author guidelines where you'll find that information. So do check the information for authors every time you submit a manuscript. Next slide, Sabine. So another important strategy would be to write a good cover letter. Now, this is something that most authors ignore, especially in this part of the world. So a good cover letter introduces your paper to the editor. This cover letter is written to the editor. And if you want to make a good impression, even before going to the abstract of the study, this is the place where you attract the attention, where you pique the interest of the editor and increase your chances of getting your paper peer reviewed. So try to make an impression of, try to tell here what is the advance that you have made in this paper and why your paper is a good fit for the journal, not the other way around. So this is a place. So try to write a good cover letter and increase chances of at least having a paper peer reviewed. Next slide, Sabrina. Thank you. Next slide. Now the next thing is, and the most important thing is telling the full story. So in academic papers, it's not like the usual stories that we read in, but it's almost similar. The only thing is that the academic papers are more structured in a certain way because people want to find certain information at certain places. For example, Lancet journals. We require, for the full story, we always require that the protocols are submitted to us, or at least a link is provided to us where the protocols have been, if the protocols have been published before for the trials and observational studies, because we want to see how the study was planned, what was designed, what was the outcomes that you are looking for, what did you start with, what was the idea that you started with, and have you been able to follow up with that plan, or things got changed in the middle. What was the primary outcome? Was the primary outcome significant enough? Did it give any good findings? Or was it not? And you only provided us with results on secondary outcomes. So was it cherry picking? So these are the things we need to know, and that tells the full story in an academic paper. This is what we want to know. What you started with and what you found. Are they same? Are they the same? So we recommend that if you do not have a full protocol, at least supply us with the statistical analysis plan that you started with in the supplementary material. It's also easier for the reviewers to check that there were no deviations from the protocol. So these are some of the things that you'll also find in the ebook. The abstract. This is the first thing that anybody would read on PubMed or on Google Scholar that introduces your story, that introduces your study to the reader. So make it impactful. It should be complete. It should have all the information that's required, especially for a full research article. It could be indicative in cases of review pieces or opinion kind of pieces. So make your abstract impactful. Keywords. Now, this is something we all ignore, but try to put in 3 or 4 keywords that you would like the readers to search for, and they will help in finding your article online. If people are searching for your article on PubMed and that keyword is there, your research will pop up. So that's very helpful in finding the articles online. Next slide, Sabrina. Thanks. Like for an introduction, in your secondary and primary and secondary objectives should be in the introduction part and not in the methods or the result part. Those are things that we look for. The introduction should end with the primary and secondary objectives. That's the place we are looking for. Methods. We always encourage authors to provide as much details on the methods as possible, because this is one section that throws light on how the research was done, and if we want to reproduce that research, how it should be done. So be transparent on this section, provide as much details as possible, and I'll also come to this in a minute. Use the reporting guidelines, where you don't have to do anything, just you have to checklist and provide as much details as possible, and your reporting will be complete. So add ethics statement, because this is essential now. It's a requirement in papers on human participants. Also the role of funding source. So these are some of the things that we look for in the method section of the Lancet papers. The results section, some of the things like primary outcomes, secondary outcomes should be there, but please do not duplicate the information that you have put in the tables and figures. So it could, I could go on and on about how to structure the methods and read the results, but please read the ebook for more details when you're going to write the paper. A discussion is a very good place to highlight your study, what have you done, how have you advanced, where does your study stand in the expanse of the literature on the topic, so that the readers can have a grasp of they can gauge where does this study sit in the entire puzzle. However, please refrain from overstating the findings. So here is your discussion, and your conclusions should flow from your findings, and it should bind again to the objectives in the introduction section. So it comes a full circle, and that's how you tell a full story. So it should bind together from the discussion to the introduction. Next slide. Yeah, so this was what I was talking about when I said about reporting fully method section. These are the guidelines that have been developed over the years for different study designs, and they are checklists for reporting a study. These help in actually writing the paper. These guidelines are actually telling you how to write a paper. So you just follow these guidelines and your paper will be fully transparent, complete, and to the standards of the journals, most journals. So follow these guidelines, look for your design and go to the website, Equator Network, and try to follow these guidelines. It may look difficult, but it's actually very helpful for the authors. It's also convenient for the editors and reviewers to check your papers if you have that checklist in place. If you have given us a checklist, we can check what are the things that you have provided in the manuscript. If you have not, you can just state that we have not done this, and it's not a condition for rejection of your paper. So it just highlights how transparent you are in your research. Next slide, Sabrina. I'm sorry. A word in writing a good title. Most often I see that people have very declamatory titles as to what they have done, what they have found, overstating their findings, and this was the pioneering research, or something very big that they have found out. However, at Lancet journals, we look for these 4 things in the title: what was done, on whom it was done, where it was done, and what was the type of your study design. So those are the 4 things. This is an academic paper, and we want to be as objective as possible. So it should be an objective title with a study descriptor. That's all. That makes up for a very good title. There's some things like, people from, for example, you're doing a study in Kerala or one district of Maharashtra, but in the title, if you write time series analysis from a low and middle income country, that would not make sense. It's not a low and middle income country. It's just one district in Maharashtra. So write the state of that one district of Maharashtra. If you're reaching out for a global readership, one district in the Maharashtra state of India. So that's an objective title. We do ask our authors to stick to these guidelines when writing a title. Sabrina, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. And the most important part that you have to show is that what is advance that you're showing in your study. In Lancet journals, we have this panel called the Research in Context panel, RIC panel, where we would ask you to look at what was the evidence before the study. Here you have to detail the literature search methods and main findings on this topic. Next section would be on added value of this study. What do we gain from doing this study? And the third section is the implication of all available evidence now. So where does this study sit in the entire puzzle? It's the so what question. It answers the so what question. What if we have done this? What if not? So that's a very important panel, and this is the first thing that we read before even reading the abstract. So this is very important, and you have to sometimes authors just send us papers writing that to our knowledge we have not found any studies in this field, and so our study is the most pioneering work in this population. However, this is the RIC that we require from authors, where you have done a literature search in a systematic method using keywords, and then explaining what is the added value of this study and the implication of all the available evidence. Next slide, Sabrina. So now you've written a full story, submit it to a journal, and wait for the editorial decision. This is how you structure your manuscript. Next slide, Sabrina. Yeah, so I told you about the 3 key points that make a paper. So these are the 3 points: content, delivery, and communication. So what are the content? What is the content of your paper? The research question, and what is the conceptual advance that study makes? Delivery, how was it delivered? The accuracy of the delivery, the style in which it was delivered, the guidelines that were used, and how transparent was the manuscript or your information. Communication, how was your study communicated externally through press, marketing, and social media? So this is how a great paper is made or not. Next slide, Sabrina. I have kept 2 slides for do's and don'ts for authors who are new to publication. Also, these are some of things that some of the seasoned authors might also look out for. Citation. These are some of the common pitfalls when you're submitting to Lancet journals. Citations. Please cite recent papers and try to keep self-citations to a minimum. Other than even if you are the only researcher in that field, try to keep self-citations to a minimum. Try to balance self-citations with external authors. Inclusive language. So we have guidelines now on what language to be used, such as person first, or language on geography, language on religion, region, sex, gender. So please look out for your community website on if they have inclusive language guidelines. Otherwise, we have guidelines on the Elsevier website, or EASE also has some resources on these guidelines. For clinical trials, please provide full information on registration details, outcomes. A full protocol and adverse events have to be reported in the abstract if there were any. Another topic of interest is the conflict of interest. So several authors are not very aware about the conflict of interest in their manuscripts. So these conflict of interest are majorly potential conflict of interest, where we are not clear whether there is a conflict of interest or not. So it's best, to declare everything that you have or might be of potential conflict, because it reassures your integrity of work. And in our area of work, transparency is the key. So this is that you should. I would recommend that if you're in confusion, ask the editors or your PI for any conflict of interest. I would also suggest some resources that you could look out for and read before submitting the ethics statement. Some studies that we get are like descriptive papers, but authors tend to play around with a lot of complicated analysis, statistical analysis, which is not required, because For instance, in countries like India, where we do not even have good epidemiology data, descriptive papers are as good as they are. We do not require any modeling or fancy statistics on that data. It's very informative as it is. We should try to build research on and over that data rather than playing around with that data. The next slide, Sabrina. Thanks. Yeah, so new and old authors both. Long manuscripts must be avoided, although we do give, author guidelines that this is the word limit. This is the word count, and these guidelines are there to help you improve the readability of your paper. Nobody's going to read a paper that's 4,000, 5,000 words long, especially a research article. So try to make it succinct, condense it, keep only information that's required. I know it's difficult to cut your paper, but try practicing that, and it will be good for your research. Again, proofreading, since if I talk about my journal, the Lancet Regional Southeast Asia, most speakers will not be English speakers, and so there might be a problem with writing English as the authors from US or other parts of the world. But it's good to use the language editing services if possible, and because it also expedites the publication process. Or you could use some of the seasoned authors to check the manuscripts for grammar and use of grammar and language. I mentioned about the checklist, so the reporting should be done according to the checklist. Highly recommended, because it also ensures transparency of communication. Plagiarism, content recycling is a very often discussed topic, and so I would recommend that I would recommend all authors to look out for guidelines and resources that help you make decisions on the concept of plagiarism and content, especially self-plagiarism, written publications. So do seek help from these guidelines and flowcharts. Yeah, Sabrina, next slide, please. Thanks, and thanks for listening. And that's my last slide, and Sabrina will introduce you to some of the resources that you could. I would highly recommend you making use of these excellent resources, especially the new ebook that's come out with the edits, recent edits. Thank you again. Back to you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Shalini. That was fantastic. You do not have to worry about copying down these resources. I will include a link to all of them in our follow-up email. You will have a recording of this presentation, links to all of this, especially that ebook. If you have not yet downloaded it, I highly recommend. So sit tight. I'm actually now going to open it up for the Q&A portion. While you were presenting, Shalini, we had a lot of questions come in. So I want to make sure we have enough time to capture as many as we can. For everyone here, we also have Yatindra Joshi on the line. He is a copy editor and trainer, and he will also help support the Q&A as well. So I'm going to jump right in. The first question that I saw a fair bit that has come up and asked a couple of different ways is to touch on open access and talking a little bit about why a journal might charge a fee for something that a lot of us consider knowledge as being a public good. And then if you could talk specifically about the Lancet and the fee that would be associated to publish with you.
Okay, that's a very interesting topic. and it might take some time, but so journals have been this entire, my publisher should have been here to talk about this. I'm not the right person, but yeah, so the publication charges are there to support the publication of a paper in the form, and there is a huge amount of editing services that go into the publication of this paper, promotion of the paper, dissemination of the paper, preparing of the web page, how your paper is disseminated on the lancet.com, how it goes to. So there are large teams that support all this work. It's not like, you know, that you type a paper on the keyboard and you just put it online. So there are a lot of things that are going on, and how this, and also for Lancet, it's also, and other major renowned journals, high impact journals, they also make sure that they have to also work on the integrity of the work that they're publishing. So they have to make sure that the knowledge that goes out is robust, and it does not contain any misinformation. It's high quality. It can be used by the practitioners, by policymakers, and so it requires a good amount of logistics. It requires a good amount of human resource, and it has expanded a lot looking at the research that has grown in the last decades. So it's also about, and so it does the research that is published now, because in the Elsevier group or the other groups, it's published in the corporate houses, in the corporate businesses, and so it's like that. But they have given you, and the research community is working on this question of whether authors should pay or institutions should pay for all this work that gets done behind the scenes of publishing, of bringing out the knowledge in a format that everybody could read. Nobody is going to read lousy paper, especially busy clinicians, busy administrators or policymakers. And you have to highlight your policy. So that kind of collaboration, that kind of dissemination is required. So the research community is working a lot on all these models, you know, gold open access, green open access. Now we have a diamond open access that's very popular in that's being played around in China, and that where neither the author nor the institution pays. So they're working on some models, and it's a work in progress unless we find out something. And the context is different for different regions, so it's difficult to find a common solution. So the Lancet Journal sits in the UK, whereas Elsevier sits in another country, Netherlands, and so the requirements of researchers and the statutory positions of research in those countries is different to India and China. And so to bring those things to our countries, it will take some time to define those things in the context of these countries or other economies. So it'll take some time, and we are coming to that. So hopefully I've answered your question. If not, I'll ask, please do write to me, and you know, I'll ask my publishers to respond to you.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to jump right into the next question. Could you discuss if there are any negative consequences to withdraw a manuscript after submission but before publication?
No, no, it's not. The authors are very, very free to withdraw their manuscript at any point of time before acceptance. So it's up to them where they want to. But if you have submitted once to a journal, it comes in the eye of several editors. It's not that it's hidden. And so sometimes, I'll give you an example. It's sometimes what happens is that I'm not sure whether it's unawareness of the ethical principles, but sometimes the authors submit their manuscript, same manuscript, to 2 or more journals at the same time. And we can see it. We have systems to check it now. And if you have submitted another journal, I will get a notification that this manuscript, a similar manuscript, has been submitted to another journal, and I'll check it, and then I'll send you an email saying that this is an unethical practice, and I'll reject it. And the manuscript will be rejected from both the journals, and you will be blacklisted from both the journals. So, so that's why I said make use of all these resources before you start on your journey to publication, and make use of these resources. Ask the editor if you're in doubt. If you're not aware of something, do ask the editors all the time.
Great. Okay. This next question may be more of a comment, but they've noticed that author guidelines are often not updated, and they're referring or checking recently published work in order to find the most accurate guidelines.
I'm not sure if they're referring to the Lancet journals, but do check with the editors, and editors are more than happy to help with the author guidelines. The author guidelines are there, but every day I get several emails to ask me about which category to submit their research to. It's always a good idea to ask the editors first. If you have a great amount of work that's going to go into the submission, if you have a huge team, so before submission, do check with the editors about the word limit, reference count, or formatting, or even if it fits into the scope of the journal. So writing 2 lines to the editor don't hurt. You know, it saves you a lot of time. It saves the author team a lot of time. You know? Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Is it true that your chance of acceptance or submissions go down? Is it lower during the summer, because especially around August when everyone is taking those holidays? Is that a wives' tale, or is that actually true?
I do not have the data. I've not checked it. I'll have to look at or ask some of my colleagues in the journals where where they get a lot of submissions from UK or US, where people do go out for a holiday, 15 days, 21 days. I'm not sure of that, but for our journal, it's not, probably. But again, I've not looked at that data.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. There are still many questions coming in, so I'm trying to capture as many as I can. This next one. Do you have a recommendation in your article for how many references that you should include?
Yes, it's all there in the information for authors. So there are categories. There are different categories in which you can submit your manuscript to. And based on those categories, there is a word count limit. So do refer to those guidelines, what we call as the information for authors, before you start writing the final manuscript, final draft.
Okay. Next question I see here is, as an editor, how do you identify potential ghost or gift authorships?
Yeah, there is a lot of, we do get a lot of training as an editor before, these ICMG guidelines, scope guidelines, we read a lot of them. But it does come with experiences, and it takes a bit to identify, to take a grasp of the scene of the authors in the region, but we have tools to check those. We have good tools to check ghost authorship or gift authorship. There is now a tool that's called Credit, and according to that tool, you have to, but that's again a responsibility of the authors. that you have to list the contribution of each author according to those guidelines. So if that, if you are abiding by those guidelines, you will then gift and ghost authorship becomes quite clear. But again, we have tools to identify those things in our system.
Okay, next question. How long does it take to get a paper published?
That's a good one. So it might range from 3 to 6 months. If it's not a tricky paper. Sometimes there are papers that require a lot of work. So it might get delayed more than that. Papers have taken more than 6 months to 8 months to get published, but those are papers that are getting delayed because of the reviewers or because of the revisions at the end of the authors, because authors are also busy people. Again, reviewers are busy people, so to ask them for the time is a big challenge for us. So I think authors are now very patient with the review work. As the number of journals increase, the reviewers' work increases, and it's very time demanding. The work, this work of peer reviewing is very time demanding. So I think it's a long time for some of the manuscripts. If that topic is a very new topic, there are few researchers in that field, so it might take some time.
Okay. Next question. We have a couple of more. I think we still have a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to hang on for like 5-10 more minutes so we can answer a few more of these. The next question is regarding titles. Could you provide any guidance for crafting effective titles for your manuscript?
Yeah, so as I said, just use 4 things. What did you do? On whom did you do? Where did you do? And what was your study design? Just these 4 things. Put your abstract and write these 4 things, 4 words for answering these 4 questions. That's all you have to give. Don't write anything else. That's what you have to do. Try doing it for some of your papers that, any of your studies that you have in pipeline. And do write to me if you have, if you need further guidance. I'll be happy to help.
Okay. Next question I see here is, are there minimum or maximum thresholds of acceptability when it comes to plagiarism?
So we have an inbuilt tool in our system. And when you submit the manuscript, it has its own minimum threshold. It has its maximum threshold, and it'll flag the manuscript if it shows. So for instance, there is a systematic review. So it'll flag the plagiarism, percentage of plagiarism. It also takes insights from the editor that it's a systematic review, and so there might be might be more number of authors have been named verbatim, so it might reflect in the plagiarism amount. But for a full research article, again in a review we will see that too. But in a full research article, we will not accept beyond a minimum amount of plagiarism. So keep it to a minimum. But it's the editor's decision to allow it or not allow it. It doesn't, the system doesn't reject your manuscript based on the plagiarism.
Okay. Is it true that some journals will reject your paper if you do not choose the open access option?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. This is a requirement by the funders, not by the journals. It's a funder's requirement. They say that if you do not, you have to publish in an open access journal, and so they pay the APC charges for that journal. It's not journal requirement. I don't think that's true. But if you have encountered that problem, I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay. The next question, this is a hot topic for sure, but AI and ChatGPT, you know, does your journal allow the use of these language modeling tools? What is your stance on the use of AI?
No, it's an evolving topic. We do not know where we stand, and we do not know where we go from here. So it's the guidelines are evolving. We are also evolving ourselves. All journals are in discussions on how to move ahead with these things. So we have guidelines which are there on the for Lancet journals. It's there on the Elsevier policy page. So now what we have asked the authors is, if you have used AI, you have to declare it. That's all. We do not reject your manuscript if you have used AI. Refrain from, and there's the policy states quite a few restrictions that you cannot use AI for images or figures. You can use it for certain things like, you know, making the language simpler or easy to read. Some of those things can be done if you're a non-English speaker. Of course, you need some help to modify the language. So those are things that you can do, but there are also things that you cannot do, you should not do, and we will be able to check those things. So there are new and new apps and new regulations coming up. I mean, I'm not a regulator here, but this is a pretty self-regulatory field of work, and as much we regulate ourselves, the lesser regulations we will have. So you know, it's better to regulate ourselves rather than regulating the entire community. So it becomes very burdensome for people who might need AI because of people who are misusing AI. So, and this is the case for anything, for any guidelines or any regulations. So please go to the website of the journal and see what are their guidelines. Most of the journals have now evolved some kind of guidelines for use of AI for the authors.
Great. The next question is actually looking for some recommendations around how long you should wait before withdrawing a manuscript if you don't hear back from a journal.
Write to the editor, ask after a month, about 4 weeks. You know, if you do not have any reviews back and you are interested, if you want a quick review, or write to the editor beforehand that, you know, you have a result waiting, or you have your PhD degree waiting for this because the paper is not published. So you could write beforehand to the editor. So if the reviews are not back in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, the editor might come back to you saying that this is not there. Please, you could submit it elsewhere, or you could go ahead and promptly ask the editor, if you do not have the reviews back, and I withdraw my manuscript, and the editor should happily allow that.
Great. Okay, we just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to cut questions there just so I can wrap up and give everyone some closing action items here. If we did not get to your question, we can absolutely follow up offline. I will send an email so you can just reply to that email and I will get you the answers that you need. But I really wanted to say thank you all for attending. You've been a great audience. Thank you, Shalini and Yatindra, for joining us and sharing your knowledge. This has been a great presentation. I hope that you are able to take some of the insights and apply them to your work. Be on the lookout for an email from me that will have the recording, that will have your certificate of attendance, that will have a link to all of these wonderful resources that we were able to share. Please download that ebook if you have not done so already. And we absolutely very much value your feedback as well. So on your way out today, if you could complete that exit survey, let us know what you thought of this presentation and what future topics you'd like us to cover here at AJE. But with that, I'd just like to close by saying thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, see ya. Thank you.
Thank you very much.